welcome to the second edition of Wrestling Reverb. I am your host. As always, I am Josh. And I've had some great feedback on my first episode of Wrestling Reverb, and it's really, it's only a small number. Don't get me wrong, I'm very early on in this, but it's very rewarding to have people comment on the fact that they like or listened or whatever to your podcast. And it does make making more a little bit more. It gives you a little bit more of a kick to make more. So that's always nice to hear and stuff like that. And I do invite everyone to share this and get this out there so I can get more of that and have more of a chance to really want to make more and to get more insight on what people want to hear and get a bit more of a debate on what to talk about. So in my first episode, for those who listened, I kind of gave, a very brief look at what I'm thinking of the current landscape of the WWE, talking about Ronda Rousey and thoughts on Raw and SmackDown, and how I didn't really enjoy Extreme Rules and the excitement for SummerSlam, etc., etc. And for this episode, what I wanted to do is kind of have a structured topic, and I went through a few different ideas. I even recorded an episode of this earlier today, and I had my microphone muted. That's how early on I am at this. So my whole thoughts about I won't say the topic just in case I do decide to re-enter that topic and talk about it, but all of my 50 minutes of talking is kind of pointless, but that is okay because I had another topic that I actually think will work better for my first kind of subject-based podcast, and kind of not so much talk about the current landscape of the WWE, but just something I enjoy. So I'm going to give you, now this isn't just with this kind of stuff that I'm about to talk about, this is just personal preference. This isn't what I think, it's just my personal preference. So I'm going to give this podcast episode is going to be my personal favorite top 10 women's matches. The reason I say my personal favorite top 10 is because I don't think they're necessarily, in the grand scheme of things, the greatest. I'm not saying they're the greatest women's matches of all time. These are just my favorite, the ones I enjoyed the most, from a wrestling standpoint, from a storyline standpoint, just hype standpoint, just stuff like that. Now there's a lot of matches that I have listed. I've made a top 10 list here in front of me. I've thought about it. I've changed it about 5 or 6 times because I kind of know my top kind of 3 or 4, but making a top 10 list is hard because it's like, where do you place what? And there's a lot of matches that I'm leaving out and a lot of matches that, might be considered as the greatest women's matches of all time. And everything like this is always, no one will ever agree on, it's always debatable. So that's why I'm saying it's my personal top 10 women's matches, my favorite women's matches. So I wanted to do this one first because this one's just, I don't know, as I've said before, how much I love women's wrestling, and it's not a discredit to, tag wrestling or just wrestling in general. I just enjoy it, and it's just, this one will get my thoughts and feelings on wrestling out there the easiest right now until I get a little bit more comfortable talking into a microphone and having a podcast and stuff like that. So we'll start off. Now, like I said, I'm probably going to get the people that do listen to this, I'm going to get like, why this match? And that's why it's my personal. You can't really then tell me, my opinion is wrong and stuff like that because everyone's opinion is so different, especially in pro wrestling. So I start off with number 10, and it's Caitlyn versus AJ Lee from Payback in 2013. This match had, at the time, you got to think, bell to bell, it may not, it holds up to now a standard, but it may be a little bit of a step behind. But at this time in 2013, the only woman that was getting any time to develop a character was was AJ Lee. And you have someone like Caitlyn, who they had a friendship from, the season 3 of the original years of NXT. So they had that friendship and stuff like that. And Caitlyn had just come off winning the Divas Championship after a program with Eve. And she kind of, once she won that championship, didn't really have any challenges. She was the Divas Champion past WrestleMania 29, and that title wasn't even defended at that year's WrestleMania. So you think of the time that we're in for the Divas division at the time. You think of that period, it wasn't a lot keeping us captivated. They weren't putting a lot of they weren't investing a lot of time into the women at this point. So Caitlyn and AJ at Payback, they had the Secret Admirer storyline, and AJ was going for the Divas Championship for the first time, and best friends, they turned on each other, they went through all this, and you could tell that this was what I think at this time was, this is the kind of stuff throughout all the years of wrestling, this is the kind of stuff that planted seeds for what we see today. No, it's not recognized as, the match that started it. It wasn't every kind of match that happened in all of the years of this build up to this women's evolution all mattered. The good, the bad, the in-between, the everything. And this is the kind of stuff where it shows that if you invest time into the women, you can get the crowd to catch on. The crowd was so invested in AJ Lee, and therefore from the friendship, they became invested in the AJ Lee versus Caitlyn story. And these girls had so much chemistry in the ring. And credit to both AJ and Caitlyn is they meshed so well, and they tried so hard to make the most of their, I believe it was a 12-minute, 13-minute match, if that. And in that, 10 to 15 minutes, they put on a great match. And there's some great moments in there where Caitlyn hit AJ with the spear and hesitated, which led AJ with a kick out, and then the couple of Black Widow attempts in there, and even like the little things in that story where Caitlyn was reluctantly tapping out at the end, and all of those things in that match, which made it so personal. The match started off so fast with Caitlyn just attacking AJ and back and forth, and that match at that time was even before the NXT days. So you think that match, having that much time in those days, is huge. And to have, a really, really great match, it's just so underappreciated in the grand scheme of the women's evolution. But this was a story that had so much love and passion into it. Yeah, okay, their prior matches to this didn't really... It was kind of a downhill slope after their Payback match, like their Money in the Bank match didn't really do much for me. It didn't seem to live up to this match, but this match alone, it really, really shows what women can do without being, in that box at that time. You couldn't go too far out, but that really changed, I think, people's perception, especially when you had someone like AJ Lee and Caitlyn, who is so underrated in the ring. Side note, I can't wait to see her in the Mae Young Classic, in the second annual Mae Young Classic later in the year, and I'm just excited to see her back. And it's just nice at that point to see women have a quality match. They had a quality match. Their match at Payback 2013, I've watched countless times. It has to be included in this list for me. So that's why I'm starting off with Caitlyn and AJ at number 10. We move into number 9. And again, I'm probably going to get really, really hammered for... Well, some of you will disagree with this a lot. Some of you will agree with this a lot. But Nikki Bella versus Paige from Money in the Bank in 2015. This was their last pay-per-view match before the quote-unquote Divas Revolution officially started with Becky, Charlotte, and Sasha Banks coming in. They had a match earlier in the year before WrestleMania 31, and it was for the Divas Championship, and it was Paige and Nikki, and it was... You could tell that these two women clicked. It was just after Give Divas a Chance and stuff like that. They had been feuding for so long up to this point at Money in the Bank 2015. And they had worked so much prior that their chemistry really shined so hard in this match. And, there was a really couple of good spots in there, a couple of great submissions. The crowd were behind it, which is, really, really good. The finish of this match was something that kind of pushed it over the edge for me, was when, they did the Bellas did the twin magic. Brie comes in, Paige rolls her up, 1, 2, 3. We think we got a new Divas champion. Nikki comes in for rack attack, and it's over. And, again, like the Caitlyn and AJ, this was just after Give Divas a Chance, and they were in the very early stages of starting. You could tell they were trying to invest more time, but they weren't fully committed yet. And matches like this did nothing but help get to that next stage. And you wanted to see Paige beat Nikki. You wanted to see a change in the women's division, and I think it was time for that. And this match for me just struck a chord. I remember watching this match live and actually being, I felt like I was 11 years old again watching wrestling and, wanting to see the bad guy get beat by the good guy. And when that didn't happen, when they cheated and they used their, underhanded tactics and their cheap finishes, it pissed me off. And that is the kind of stuff that you look for in wrestling. And I just think that this match, also like Caitlyn and AJ, doesn't get the recognition that it deserves. Because it's overshadowed by, other matches that, granted may have been better in the ring, but you've got to remember the time period of each match happening. You've got to take the match and dissect it for what it is at that time period. You can't just put this match up against something that you see today, one of the bigger matches that you see today. You just can't do that because it's a different kind of match. Not every match has to be 25 minutes and have, 30 false finishes for it to be incredible. It can be simple. It can be short. Not that this match was short, but it can be shorter and still entertain. If it's entertaining you, then it shouldn't matter, what happens bell to bell, as long as it's entertaining. The aim of wrestling is entertainment. So, stuff like this deserves to be in, spots where we talk about it as, personal favorites of people. So yeah, that match is at my number 9. Number 8 is Mickie James versus Trish Stratus. Now, the story of this match everyone knows. The stalker falling in love with Trish, and then Trish not wanting that, and Mickie goes crazy. The match itself, right up until the finish, was brilliant. The crowd was so responsive. We had spots like powerbombs out of Hurricane Ranas and reversing stratospheres into, and Mickie just being so on at that stage, and, the crowd not respecting Trish, being in Chicago at WrestleMania, and, WrestleMania, it was at that point the greatest WrestleMania women's match in history. Now, the only reason I have this so, back further in this list at number 8 is because of the finish. Now, it's not the spot where Mickie licks her fingers after, going in there with Trish. It's this... She did botch. And that happens. And I understand that. And that's not a knock on her or anything like that. It's just more so it was the finish of the match. And it just, took that little bit away from me, for me. And it's just, more so disappointing that happened. But nonetheless, it was a great match, great crowd reception, great moment for Mickie James. Great moment for, towards the end of Trish's career too in 2006. So, Trish had been on top of the women's division as the women's champion for I think around 430 days or something at that point. So she was, very much the pinnacle of the women's division at that time. Trish was on top of her game. Mickie was on top of her game, being so new and fresh and over and just a great character for the women's division, which, that was more so towards the end of the original golden age of women, the Trishas, the Litas, the Molly Hollys, the Victorias, the Jazzes, stuff like that. So it was getting to more towards the modelly stage. So Mickie being in that role and kind of taking, it was kind of a passing of the torch from Trish to Mickie to say, Mickie's our next kind of girl, and then, all the years that follow. But that match really did kick ass, and it just shows how much effort those girls put into that match, because you could tell that they were just trying to steal the show. And it was a good show, WrestleMania 22, so, hats off to them. And, yeah. Number 7 on my list is Charlotte Flair, Sasha Banks, and Becky Lynch at WrestleMania 32. If you take away even the wrestling of this match, the historic, relaunch of the WWE Women's Championship, and that alone, on top of being at WrestleMania, is a pretty big deal. And WrestleMania 32 in a whole was it was okay. There wasn't really any. This was the best match of WrestleMania 32 in my opinion. They stole the show. Bell to bell, this was the best wrestling match of WrestleMania 32 as well. So, and these girls wanted to show that. Charlotte Flair is incredible in the ring. I think one of the greatest ever, just naturally gifted wrestlers. Sasha Banks is so good in the ring as well, as is Becky Lynch. Probably Becky, to me, is the overall, out of the 4 horsewomen, the all-round best in the ring. I think she's so good in the ring. Doesn't get, she kind of hides behind Charlotte and just kind of hides behind Sasha in regards to, and even Bayley to a certain degree, of how good she really is. This match, man, there was so many great spots in this match. The frog splash from Sasha, and suicide dive from Becky to Ric Flair, and then you had the finish with the Charlotte figure 8 on Becky Lynch, and Flair holding Banks back, and it was just and not only this, great matches sometimes are enhanced by incredible entrances, and you had Charlotte with the the pyro and the Ric Flair's robe, and Sasha coming out with Snoop Dogg, and I mean, this match just had that big fight feel, and you knew that this was something special, and you knew that this was something historic. And this match, it blew everyone away. It was so good. The expectations for the match were so high, and they delivered. It's hard to do that sometimes. Sometimes you look at matches and you think this match is going to be incredible, and then it's just good. This match was great. There was nothing, horribly, that went horribly wrong. Everything they just clicked so well. Knowing each other so well in the ring at that point too was important, and every single one of those women had a legitimate reason to be in that match. There was nothing, just thrown together. It was just the perfect match. Charlotte went over, first ever women's championship, or the return as I call it, because there was a women's championship, but whatever it may be. And yeah, there's just not much more to say about that match other than it's just great. Before I go into number 6, I do want to say a couple of, some can't forget matches that didn't quite make my list, but I'll go through about 3 of them now. I've got some more, but the Iron Man match between Sasha Banks and Bayley, I think gets overshadowed a bit by their previous encounter to this point, but that match was very good, and there was just a few things, for me that didn't click quite as well. And I mean this as no disrespect to the Full Sail crowd, but I think it was because it was in a smaller arena that it didn't feel quite as big. And not saying that Full Sail isn't a good arena, because I like that crowd. I do like that NXT holds it there, but at that point they were holding some takeovers there, and they're coming off of Brooklyn. I just didn't think it just felt a little bit smaller than Brooklyn. So that's just my opinion, and it was, people can dispute that all they want, but that's just my opinion. Trish Stratus and Victoria, the hardcore match. The reason I don't put this in my favourite is, although I loved it because it was a hardcore match and not really many women got many opportunities to do that at that stage, there was just too much that went wrong. Too many mistakes in that match just to comfortably put it in my favourite matches. It was a fun match. Hardcore wrestling is fun to watch. Trash can lids and kendo sticks. I think there was brooms in this match, and trash cans and fire extinguishers and stuff like that. The finish, it bothered me with, Victoria being so new. She didn't really have a finish. She won with a snap suplex. It was just whatever. But, it was a fun match. One more can't forget match is Charlotte and Becky Lynch at the Royal Rumble in 2006. This is when Charlotte just turned on Becky, and, great match. Flair coming in. I think he kissed Becky Lynch at one point from memory. Sasha coming out at the end. It was just a great match. A really fun match. Sometimes wrestling doesn't necessarily have to be great. Like in-ring action. Not that this match wasn't, but it doesn't have to. As long as it's fun, as long as it's entertaining, that's what it really matters. It really doesn't matter about everything else. As long as it's fun, as long as you're entertained, that's what the name of the game is. So, yeah. We'll go into number 6, and it's Charlotte Flair versus Natalya from NXT TakeOver in 2014. This match is widely renowned as one of, in WWE's eyes, in fans' eyes, as one of the greatest women's matches of all time. The only reason I put it up, a little bit, towards the back of my list is just because personal preference, really, of just other matches I enjoy more. This match is bell to bell one of the greatest women's matches of all time. It is so good. The emotion, with Flair and Bret Hart being at ringside, and the legacy that the Harts and the Flairs have in the ring. Natty is the best technical wrestler. Well, not even just women in the company right now. So, and Charlotte being so new, we didn't really know too much what Charlotte could do, and Natty and her just created magic that night. And it was truly, you felt that at the end of that match. You knew what you'd just witnessed. You knew that it was great. And it kind of, after Paige and Emma had that great match at NXT Arrival, you didn't know if it could live up. And especially because at that point in 2014, although Natty had been around for so long, because of the limited opportunities, you'd never really seen Natty in a long classic match. And this was her opportunity to show that she could carry someone, and she could make magic in the ring. And we all knew that she could. It was just she never had that opportunity to show it. And with her and Charlotte, they did do that. And they did make history that night. And it put Charlotte on the map. It made Charlotte what she is in 2018, what she is today. It helped, it reinvigorated Natty's career to the point where, she got comeuppance from it, and she became a bigger and better wrestler, a bigger and better star because of it. So Charlotte and Natty, just a classic, really. It is just literally a classic. Moving on to number 5, we've got the NXT Women's Championship Fatal 4-Way match from NXT Arrival in 2015. On paper, after all of the matches, from Natty to Charlotte and Sasha, all of the run with Charlotte, being the NXT Women's Champion, and, Team Bay, and then Bayley comes into the fold, and this was when NXT was at that point where the women were stealing the show on a night in and night out basis. They were literally taking the show and taking it over, no pun intended. And at this point, Bayley, Sasha, Charlotte, Becky, were starting to be known as the Four Horsewomen, you know, kind of on the down low, they were starting to be known as that. And you knew that any time that any one of those girls were in the ring with one another, it was magic. And on paper, you knew that this match was going to be the best match of the night. And man, did it deliver. This Fatal 4-Way had everything you want in a Fatal 4-Way. It had every single person shining. No one looked bad in that match. Every single person had a moment where you thought it could be over. You know, and Sasha Banks finally getting the NXT Women's Championship with Charlotte, you know, getting pinned by Sasha. A side note about Fatal 4-Ways, when it is something like this, when they are building, I like when the champion gets pinned. It's just a personal kind of nitpicky thing, but I like when the champion gets pinned. I don't know why, I just always have. It's nice to see that. It's nice to see, you know, only because of the program that Charlotte and Sasha had been having, I wanted Sasha to beat Charlotte. You know, and it was just so exciting. That match was so fast-paced, so exciting, so many spots, so many things that they were only just scratching the surface at that time of what they're doing now. So it's nice to be in a time period just before everything got amazing, you know, to the quality it is now. It's nice to... It's like watching someone chase a championship, and you love the journey, and you love when they get that championship, but after they win that championship, sure, it's fine, sure, it's great, I love that they're champion, but it does get a little bit like, okay, like, we've seen the journey, we got to the destination, it's kind of like, now what? This was the journey at this stage to make women's wrestling the main event, to be the main event, you know, to main event pay-per-views, to main event Raws, to main event SmackDowns, to get to the main roster. This was the journey, and it was just fun, and at this point, it was like, wow, this is monumental for what they're capable of. Tip of the iceberg, really. I'll go through a few more honourable, you know, can't forget matches. Paige and Emma at NXT Arrival was the plant of what WWE recognizes as the start of the women's evolution. It was the start of the Divas Revolution. At that point in WWE, didn't really hear of too much. This is awesome, you know, women's match in a Divas match, so that deserves to be mentioned there. Bayley and Charlotte from Raw in 2017. It was in Vegas. It was the main event of Raw. Bayley, you know, got the championship thanks to Sasha Banks, and incredible match. I think the reason I get a little bit iffy on it is because I think Bayley was given a little too much too soon, but nonetheless, it was incredible match. Yeah, just great. Alundra Blaze versus Bull Nakano from SummerSlam in 1994. Now, this is obviously before I was even alive. This is just, so it's hard to say this was one of my personal favorites because I wasn't in that time period. I wasn't watching at that time. I wasn't, you know, obviously it was impossible for me to be invested as much as it is when you're there because you don't see it every week and stuff like that. But I've watched this match multiple times, and it is, especially in the 90s when it is a different style of wrestling from what we see today, or even 10 years ago, it is so different. You know, it was a great match. You had Luna Vachon there and, you know, it was just that classic American humble pie, humble as apple pie kind of lady in Alundra Blaze beating, you know, the evil foreigner in Bull Nakano. So, great match. Alundra Blaze is so good in the ring, as is Bull, you know, and it was at SummerSlam, you know, just a great match. We'll move on to number 4, and it's Trish Stratus and Lita, December 2004, in the Raw main event, Women's Championship on the line. As everyone knows, the first time, well, other than, you know, Stephanie and Lita, but this was the first time that women had main evented a show just on their own for the Women's Championship, and just because of this, how good their story was, how people were invested in it, it was just an incredible match, an absolute kick-ass match. I can't say enough good things about this match. I can't say enough good things about Trish Stratus. I can't say enough good things about Lita. Suicide Dive, where Lita lands so awkwardly, and oh my god, what a moment. You know, the finish, hometown, just, you know, and it wasn't long. It was only around 6 or 7 minutes long in the main event of Raw. And, you know, to go on, and it was so historic as being that, you know, women didn't main event the show for so long again after this, which sucks. But it goes to show the talent and the quality and the investment that Trish and Lita had from the fans. And it's just, I mean, I can watch that match over and over again and still feel like I'm watching it for the first time. So many near falls and et cetera, and just quality stuff. Number 3, it's Charlotte Flair versus Asuka, WrestleMania 34. Now I feel like this match was so great and so amazing, and people don't seem to give it the credit it was due because of Asuka losing. And I think it's you know, unwarranted. That match was so good, so many amazing counters, show of athleticism, you know, and just an absolute quality match. And just Charlotte and Asuka are so good in the ring. And, you know, Charlotte now, and this is saying something, Charlotte now is better than Charlotte 2 years ago, and Charlotte 2 years ago was incredible. Asuka is just a beast. You know, what they did after this match is another thing, but this match was my favorite match of WrestleMania 34. I watched WrestleMania 34 with a few other people. 2 of them are absolutely, invested as much as I am in pro wrestling. The other is kind of that next tier down kind of fan where they're not invested in pro wrestling. They love WWE. And even they said they enjoyed that match just as much as I did. And that's when I know that sometimes my hype and my love for pro wrestling can get a little, judgmental, or it can get a little, I get a little bit too, of that over the top kind of pro wrestling kind of mentality. But if I see a casual fan loving the match as much as I do, I know that there's something special there. And also, speaking of like casual fans versus, someone who is living and breathing the industry of pro wrestling, is that it's weird to see how a casual fan reacts to things as how I do, or, the couple of people that are invested in pro wrestling as much as I am, how they react to things versus casual fans and stuff like that. So I love that group of people I have that I get to experience wrestling with, because it is so different, and it makes me understand a little bit more that, like, I can enjoy things on a different level than a casual fans, and vice versa. And but just to meet in the middle, that there is something special about that when a casual fan and a hardcore fan can meet in the middle and say, this is incredible. That match to me blew my mind. I loved every minute of it. I loved Asuka in that match with the intensity that she had. I love that Charlotte knew that she, when you watch wrestling and it's kind of like both of these talent cannot lose. They don't want to lose. That's what wrestling should be. At the end of the day, yes, we know it's a scripted product. We know it's predetermined. But at the same time, it is still a competition. It is still wanting to be the very best. So both of these ladies did not want to lose this match. And that's something that's a little bit left out of pro wrestling, in the last 10 or so years. And it's nice to see it when it is there. And it's nice to see it in the match. And it's nice to see that every move matters. And this match just, yeah. And for the most part, this match kind of stayed relatively inside the ring. With the exception of Charlotte with a few spots. But this match, it's just so incredibly good. And And yeah, I can't even say too much more about it because it's just be like milking it dry. But yeah, great match. I'm gonna get through the last few honorable mentions. These are some more can't forget matches. The 2018 Women's Royal Rumble, just for how incredibly historic and warranted and overdue this match was, and to have, talent come back like Tori Wilson and Trish Stratus, Lita, Molly Holly, Michelle McCool, Kelly, Jacqueline, just to name a few. And to see the generations collide from the then, the now, and the forever with the NXT girls and the girls from the past and the girls of now. It made me feel like a kid again watching wrestling, because it made me feel so much joy. It was the main event of the show. It was the Royal Rumble this year. It was the most hyped match of the Royal Rumble this year. And then you had Ronda come out at the end, and just everything about that match was just... You felt almost privileged and honoured to watch something like that, because you'll never recreate that moment again. They'll have more Women's Royal Rumbles, and it just will not be the same as the first. The first is always the best, and that match was just... I've watched that match so many times, and I just love it every time. Moving on, we have all of the Sasha, Charlotte, the Hell in a Cell, and the Falls Count Anywhere, and the Iron Woman, and their match in October on Raw. Just every time these two get in the ring, it is pure magic. Even their matches on NXT were incredible. So these two just click. They just know each other so well, and it's something special when these two get in the ring. I can't wait to see them go again too, because I think that could be... Oh, man, I just can't even get over how good they are in the ring. Asuka and Ember Moon from NXT TakeOver Brooklyn 3. I'll be the first to admit that I didn't enjoy Asuka and Ember Moon at NXT TakeOver Chicago. I didn't love the match. I didn't like the way it went. I didn't think they clicked that well. I was disappointed in that match. And it sucks because Ember and Asuka are such great individuals. And when this got announced the second time, I wasn't very excited. I thought it was time for Asuka to lose, and I thought that it was time maybe for Ember to win. I didn't really have any kind of expectation going into this match as I did the first one, which is a good thing, because, sometimes expectation can, ruin a match sometimes. So going in with no expectation to this match, and going into this match completely open-minded and completely like, I'm not sure about this, how this is going to go and how this is going to work. I was completely surprised. This match, they clicked so well. Sometimes that happens in wrestling, and that match was just so good. And the last can't forget match before I go into my top two is Sasha Banks and Becky Lynch. And man, this was from NXT TakeOver Unstoppable. It was Becky's match to win and Sasha Banks' match to lose. And you could tell that, Sasha had everything to lose and Becky had everything to gain. They clicked so well. There was so many, this match, out of all of the NXT Women's Championship matches of that time, was the less flashy, the more wrestling, and I loved it. Becky is incredible. Sasha Banks is incredible. You knew that their time was coming to an end in NXT. You knew it was time for them to come up very soon. I'm glad they got this match through. The finish was incredible. Everything about that match was incredible. Now we'll move into our top two. And number two is Sasha Banks versus Charlotte, the first encounter on Raw in July of 2016, when Charlotte finally lost the Women's Championship to Sasha Banks. Incredible moments, with the Eddie Guerrero tossing of the title and, blaming Dana, getting Dana out of there. The finish of that match with Charlotte, you saying, you can never beat me. That is what gets you hooked on wrestling. That's the storytelling part. That is what wrestling is all about, is getting you hooked, getting you involved, wanting, certain people to win or lose. I, at that stage, was the biggest Sasha Banks fan, I think, ever. Man, I could never shut up about that woman and how great she was in the ring and how much I wanted her to get that championship and, keep that championship and defend that championship and whatever it may be. But that match was so good. There were so many things in that match that were just mind-blowing. It should have been the main event of Raw. It was the first Raw after the draft, and it just, oh man, like I can't say how emotionally involved I was in that match, because it is just too hard to explain how emotionally involved in that match. Everything in that match was so good, was so amazing, and I can't say enough about that match. I think Charlotte Flair is the best women's performer of our generation. She is so naturally gifted in the ring. She's not my favorite. I can admit that. I don't think she's my favorite, but I think she is the greatest. She is so naturally good, as opposed to you can tell that it is just in her blood, which it is, being her dad, Ric Flair. She is genetically superior to the other women. And that's sort of marketing plug. That is the truth. And, as great as Sasha and Bayley and Becky and, countless other women have been, Charlotte is just... She just understands it, and she didn't even grow up and wanting to be in this business, but it's just in her DNA to be better, to be the best, and that is coming from someone that isn't her biggest fan, that isn't her biggest supporter. I like Charlotte. I don't dislike Charlotte, but there's a fairly long list in front of her that I prefer over her. But anytime Charlotte is in the ring, it is just... It's nearly can't miss, with the exception of a few, lackluster contests. There really isn't too many people better than Charlotte. So, yeah, that is my number 2. My number 1 is Bayley, Sasha Banks, NXT TakeOver Brooklyn. This is probably a lot of number 1s, and I'll even say this isn't just my favorite women's match of all time. This is my favorite wrestling match of all time. For a long time, my favorite wrestling match of all time was Edge and Mick Foley, WrestleMania 22, the hardcore match. I dig that match hard. It was my favorite match for a very, 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 very long time. This is the only match that has ever triumphed in my personal eyes. I know those matches are very different matches. I know those people are very different people. And it's very two different styles of wrestling, but if I am sitting down in a room with a person who has never watched wrestling, I will play this match probably first. That's how much I think it can get people invested. You show the video, even the video package at the start of a match, which I haven't even mentioned how important those are to get you hooked on a match for someone who has never watched wrestling. I have showed that match to people who have never watched wrestling before, and even if they still didn't really appreciate wrestling after it, they do understand why people like it, why people can be invested, because it does take you away. Everything in that match was excellent, pure quality, and I just can't say too much more about it without rambling about the same thing, but that is my personal favorite. I actually will go on to say, and I think that is the greatest women's match of all time. It's one of the greatest wrestling matches of all time in my eyes too. Bayley, Sasha, they literally knocked it out of the park. Everything in that match will never ever be triumphed with them two. They will never beat how good that match is. And it is my personal favorite wrestling match of all time, my personal favorite women's match of all time. But yeah, guys, that is my top 10 personal favorite women's matches. Feel free to debate along. Give me your top 10 list, because I'd like to hear that, because I like to see where other people's mindsets are at. If, you probably won't agree with this list. You might agree with some. You might not agree with it at all. But I'd love to hear you at Joshua Robinson on Twitter. That is Joshua instead of Joshua, W instead of the U. And I really appreciate you guys listening along to this this podcast, and keep supporting it, keep sharing it around, get it out there, because I want more people to listen to this podcast. I've got a lot of feedback from a few different people about how I approach this and how they like this, and I'm going to be producing a few more episodes over the next week just to get you guys adapted to my style of how I approach this, and I really want some feedback and love and suggestions and criticism, whatever it may be. And I just want this to really take off and really be something that I can get involved in, because I love talking about this. This is so fun to me. And yeah, this is just the tip of the iceberg of what we can do, what I can do on here. I want to really find my groove with everything. I want to do some reviews of old shows. I want to get into some other, lists. I want to get into some other topics about wrestling, some controversial things about wrestling. I want to actually get someone in on the podcast, maybe, after I get a little bit more established, of someone who doesn't really know too much about wrestling. And to get that take, because we as an internet wrestling community really only talk to people that are very involved in this business. Sometimes it's nice to get outside perspective of a casual fan or someone who doesn't really know that much about wrestling, because you have to understand that, there is just more than us that watch wrestling, more than the hardcore wrestling community that watch wrestling. So you need to understand the other aspects of pro wrestling and why this happens, and even if we don't agree with it, because I don't agree with a lot of it, but I know it and I understand it's there, and I understand that there has to be catered to that as well, not just us. So it'd be nice to get opinions and stuff on that from other people, and I invite you guys on Twitter to tell me, because you get on this show, we could do Q&As, and we could do live things via Skype, and get into and have people that I don't even know to talk to, because knowing someone and getting their take on pro wrestling, and not knowing someone and getting their take on pro wrestling, is two totally different things. Also, before I quickly wrap this up, I also want to say I invite people to talk to me on Twitter about people who are going to the Super Showdown in Melbourne on October 6th, because that is going to be kick-ass. I'm so excited about that. Being an Australian, being a big wrestling fan, I want to get to know people that are going to that show, because I'd like to know what you're excited for, know who you're excited to see, and so get on me on Twitter about that, because I want as many people talking about Super Showdown as possible and getting excited for that. Heading over to Melbourne at the start of October for it, and being in South Australia, Melbourne's a fair distance, blah blah blah. I am excited to go to that. So I'd like to hear from the people that are going to that, and even the people who aren't going to that are still excited about it, because it's a big deal for us Australians. So I'm going to wrap it up here. Please, like I said, hit me up on Twitter, and I'll get back to you guys. Peace.
Produce long-lasting changes in the neurochemical state of the brain. So this is really rather unlikely with having